Under a gentle morning sun, 19-year-old Mia Johnson believes she's in for a simple errand, picking up snacks for a cozy movie night with her father, the famous action star Dwayne Johnson. Yet beneath the hum of market chatter and the aroma of fresh produce, an unsettling presence lurks. A single uniformed officer, burning with silent hostility, locks eyes on her, forcing a sudden collision between everyday life and unimaginable brutality. What starts as a routine grocery run spirals into a fierce confrontation where raw power collides with unchecked authority, leaving Mia in danger she never anticipated. Only one thing is certain. Dwayne's protective fury is about to be awakened in ways the world has never witnessed. Stay with us to see how this tense story unfolds, and don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications because you won't want to miss a second of the drama that follows. A warm, honey-gold sunrise unfurled across the tranquil suburban roads, illuminating rows of tidy homes and the neatly trimmed lawns that flank them. In the midst of this picturesque neighborhood, 19-year-old Mia Johnson steered her small hatchback into the bustling local market's parking lot, humming along to a soft tune on the radio. Mia was home for the summer, eager to spend quality time with her father, Dwayne Johnson, a well-known action film star who, as of late, had been embracing a quieter routine away from the high-intensity glow of Hollywood. She'd volunteered to gather an assortment of snacks and fresh produce for an evening of movies and laughter with him, an enduring tradition that reminded them both how comforting an ordinary life could be when cameras weren't rolling. Before she left the house, Mia exchanged lighthearted banter with her father. She teased Dwayne about whether he'd prefer a classic bag of potato chips, a tub of popcorn drenched in butter, or some healthier alternatives like fruit salad. Predictably, he countered with a playful grin, urging her to surprise him but not to stay out too long, lest he forget how to have fun by himself. Their playful exchange was a staple of their relationship, formed through countless road trips to filming locations, stolen downtime between Dwayne's scenes, and the closeness that arises from a father-daughter duo navigating a life so frequently under public scrutiny. Yet if Dwayne's years in the industry had taught him anything, it was that peace could be as fleeting as a Hollywood cameo. Even the most routine day sometimes harbored the seeds of profound upheaval. Unbeknownst to Mia, this simple grocery run was about to morph into something far more harrowing. The market teemed with early morning energy. Stalls boasted bright peppers, eggplants with a glossy sheen, vine-ripened tomatoes that looked like they had been hand-painted, and a rainbow of fruits glimmering under the rising sun. Vendors called out with practiced charm, offering samples and touting deals, while an eclectic mix of families, elderly couples, and single shoppers perused the aisles. Mia found the mundane nature of this environment strangely soothing, compared to her father's world, where specialized diets, film schedules, and media buzz often dictated what passed for normal. Wandering around a simple farmer's market felt refreshingly authentic. An elderly woman selling homemade jams beckoned Mia closer. Curious, Mia wandered over and asked about the different flavors. The woman insisted Mia try a small spoonful of blackberry lavender jam. Eyes widening with delight at the taste, Mia made a mental note that this might pair perfectly with the artisan bread she spotted 2 stalls down. A spark of gratitude lit up her features. Small acts of kindness like these made it feel like the world still had corners of warmth, far removed from tabloids and paparazzi lenses. But as Mia pushed deeper into the labyrinth of produce crates and conversation, she sensed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. A prickle of unease started at the base of her neck. She glanced over her shoulder and caught sight of a tall, broad-shouldered man in a dark blue uniform. From the weight of his stare alone, it was clear he was a police officer. Officer Nate Larson, though Mia didn't know his name or reputation just yet. His face held a rigid, cool disapproval, the kind that suggested he was on the prowl for something or someone to confront. In a town like theirs, where Dwayne's fame had become part of the local tapestry, Mia rarely worried about anonymity. Still, she found herself swallowing a flicker of nervousness. She'd heard secondhand stories of routine encounters with officers spiraling into frightening territory, yet she assured herself that nothing about her was suspicious. She was merely a young woman checking out some fruits, planning a relaxed family night. Her father's celebrity status shouldn't matter in a place like this, or so she believed. So she added cucumbers and apples to her basket, then pivoted to shop for some drinks and snacks. But in her peripheral vision, Officer Larson suddenly shifted his stance and strode toward her with a resolute purpose, as though she just trespassed onto his personal domain. Officer Nate Larson's features wore an almost permanent scowl, etched as though life itself had left a bitter taste in his mouth. Mia halted her cart abruptly, its wheels protesting in a short squeak. In that moment, it felt as though the sunlight dulled, and the lively clamor of the market receded into the background. With a few brisk steps, Larson planted himself in front of her, a manifestation of tension that disrupted the previously harmonious scene. "Got yourself a permit to be wandering around here?" he barked, his tone all contempt and barbed syllables. The question was so out of left field that Mia's first reaction was simple bafflement. She blinked at him, her heart beginning to thump faster. "Excuse me, sir," she managed, trying to maintain a polite calm. "I'm just buying groceries like everyone else." But the disdain flickering in Larson's eyes suggested that he'd already decided Mia was trouble. His lip curled in a subtle sneer. "People like you," he snarled, voice thick with an undercurrent of bias, "always think you can come and go as you please, ignoring any rules you don't like." From the corner of Mia's vision, she saw a few market-goers abruptly turn their heads. A man paused mid-browse of the artisanal honey stand, eyebrows raised in alarm, while a pair of elderly women exchanged worried glances. The phrase "people like you" struck Mia like a slap. She was no stranger to the quiet prejudice that sometimes hovered around her family's success or her father's background. Anger flickered in her chest, but she wrangled it under control, remembering her father's cautions about staying level-headed in tense scenarios. With measured dignity, she responded, "Sir, I'm not causing any problems. This is a public market, right?" Larson's upper lip twitched, as if her reasoning only served to stoke his ire. "Oh, you're being real clever now, aren't you?" he spat. "Why don't you show me some ID if you're so innocent?" A swirl of conflicting emotions tightened Mia's throat. Indignation, confusion, and a creeping sense of vulnerability. She wore a simple tank top and jeans, nothing that screamed suspect. Her father's face might appear on billboards, but that didn't automatically grant her special privilege. She had nothing to hide, yet the officer's hostility hinted that logic wouldn't matter. Glancing around for a friendly face, Mia noticed the tension that now gripped the onlookers. Some stood behind crates of tomatoes or peaches, seemingly paralyzed by the scene unfolding. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Stay calm, act rational, and never escalate." But another voice inside her, fueled by her own sense of justice, whispered that she shouldn't let him bully her. Finally, she managed a polite, "All right, I'll get my ID." She rummaged through her purse, hating the quiver in her hands that betrayed her nerves. The very act felt invasive, as though, simply by existing in the market, she had to prove her legitimacy. Larson loomed nearer, eyes brimming with an impatience that bordered on malevolence. "Make it quick," he snapped, each syllable curling with threat. The market around them had gone strangely quiet, as though someone had dimmed its lively soundtrack. Mia's pulse pounded in her ears, and a voice at the back of her mind whispered that she should be careful. She was alone in this confrontation, with no father or friend to back her up. But a flicker of resilience flared within her. This was the same resolve she had inherited from Dwayne, the same will that had propelled her through any challenge she encountered. Her voice steadied as she replied, "I'm not breaking any laws, officer. If you have no reason to suspect me, I can refuse to show ID." "That's my right." She half expected him to calm down, to realize that simply citing her rights might keep the encounter from escalating. Instead, Larson's glower hardened, his body stiffening in a classic posture of intimidation. The flicker of a smirk ghosted across his mouth. "You want to make this difficult?" he said, the threat in his tone as clear as day. "Fine, we'll do this the hard way." With those words, Mia's fear deepened. She could practically feel the negative energy radiating from him. Gone was the sense of normalcy she'd cherished moments before, replaced by an undercurrent of dread that roiled beneath the surface of her outward calm. She squared her shoulders, deciding that if push came to shove, she wouldn't cower. This was her hometown, and she refused to be humiliated in it. Unbeknownst to her, however, the worst was yet to come. The stillness around them felt almost oppressive, as though the entire market collectively held its breath. Mia could sense more people inching closer, forming a circle of unspoken tension. A bearded man near the bakery stall whispered urgently to his wife, who then pulled out her phone. Another shopper, an elderly gentleman with a cane, opened his mouth to intervene but seemed to lose his nerve at the sight of Larson's uniform. In her peripheral vision, Mia saw a vendor discreetly reaching for something behind his stand, maybe to call for assistance. Yet no one openly stepped forward to quell the growing storm. Determined to document this encounter, Mia reached into her purse for her smartphone, feeling the adrenaline spike through her veins. Her father had always stressed caution, but also standing up for oneself. This phone was her lifeline, capable of capturing the reality of the situation. With a trembling breath, she lifted it so the camera faced Officer Larson. "I'm recording," she announced, the waver in her tone belied by the conviction in her eyes. "If you're going to detain me for no reason, I want evidence of it." Rage contorted Larson's features. "Put that phone down," he hissed, as if the mere act of recording was a grave insult. His words vibrated with an undercurrent of something primal, like he'd been challenged in a way he couldn't abide. Mia's heart hammered, but she stood firm. "No, officer, you have no right to stop me from filming." Even she was surprised by the steadiness of her words. A swirl of fear and defiance warred inside her chest, but she clung to the notion that retreat would only embolden him further. His response came swiftly, a hand darting forward with far more violence than she'd anticipated. He snatched the phone, practically ripping it from her grasp, and with a vindictive twist, he hurtled it toward the ground. The phone shattered with a sharp crack against the concrete, shards of the screen scattering like glassy confetti. The spectacle lasted barely a second, but for Mia it felt like slow motion. The device that held her personal messages, photos, and lifelines now lay broken, beyond repair. An exclamation of disbelief rippled through the crowd, which had grown larger by the minute. A woman gasped, "He just destroyed her phone!" while a teen in a hoodie immediately started recording from his vantage point. Mia's pulse roared in her ears, a flurry of disbelief and anger. "You can't do that," she managed, voice pitching upward. "You're a cop. You're supposed to protect and serve, not—" "Shut up," Larson interjected, spittle flecking his lip. "I told you to drop it. You didn't listen." He leaned in, face inches from hers, the stale odor of old coffee and raw aggression rolling off him. "Now you're gonna see what happens when you don't respect the law." Before Mia could form a coherent retort, a shocking movement disturbed the edge of her vision. Larson's fist sailed toward her left cheek in a swift, brutal arc. She attempted to recoil, but the blow connected with savage force, sending a jolt of pain radiating across her face. Her vision blurred, and her legs crumpled beneath her, the market's pavement rushing up to meet her in a painful collision. She tasted coppery blood, felt the sting of tears burning her eyes. The world tilted, spinning in a nauseating swirl of light and color. Shouts erupted from bystanders. "Oh my God! Someone call for help! He just punched her!" Dazed and disoriented, Mia lay sprawled on the ground, head pounding. The throbbing in her cheeks seemed to intensify with every ragged breath she took. She was unsure if she said it out loud or only thought it, but a single word formed in her mind. Dad. She wanted Dwayne here to see this injustice, to protect her from a reality that felt more like a nightmare. Rising voices shattered her brief cocoon of shock. A bystander or two, galvanized by the raw cruelty of the act, stepped forward. One man attempted to kneel beside her, but Larson snarled a warning. "Back off unless you want the same," he roared, brandishing his baton. A hush of petrified rage fell over the watchers. This was no ordinary scene of petty conflict. Something far more menacing had cracked open. Mia reached a trembling hand to her throbbing cheek, wetness smearing her fingers. Blood mingled with tears. Through watery vision, she made out Larson's victorious sneer. In that heartbeat, she realized she was truly vulnerable, face to face with an authority figure who had lost all sense of restraint or basic morality. For several heartbeats, Mia's battered form remained on the cold pavement, her mind striving to piece together what had just happened. She tried to push herself up, but pain burned through her cheek and reverberated down her neck, making her arms weak. Around her, the murmuring crowd was locked in a standoff with Officer Larson, who brandished his baton like an enforcer at the gates of tyranny. Several bystanders whispered anxiously among themselves, but none dared to do more than glare. A tall man in his late 20s, wearing a ball cap and sports jacket, finally mustered the nerve to intervene. He approached with palms raised, voice loud enough to be heard over the frightened murmur. "You can't just attack a young woman like that," he said, the moral outrage plain in his eyes. "She's done nothing wrong, and we all saw it." Larson whipped around, baton half lifted. "Stay out of this," he spat, face blotchy with fury. "One more word out of you and you'll be next." His weapon gleamed under the fluorescent market lights, a menacing testament to how far his sense of superiority extended. A collective intake of breath from the onlookers revealed the crowd's bewilderment and shock. They had witnessed a scene that might as well have been plucked from a news headline about police brutality. Yet the uniform and badge pinned to Larson's chest added a layer of complexity that kept many from intervening. Intimidation thrived in that uncertain space. Mia, eyes filling with tears and mouth quivering, managed to sit upright, her back pressed against the sturdy leg of a produce stall. The dull ache in her skull and the throbbing pressure on her cheek forced her to breathe in short, shallow gasps. Despite the pain, her defiance flared anew. "Why are you doing this?" she rasped, fury burning through her shock. "I haven't harmed anyone." Larson's expression remained twisted, his voice dripping with scorn. "You need to learn respect." He said it like it was the simplest truth in the world, like his authority justified any force he chose to exert. "Next time you want to challenge an officer, remember this moment." Mia's outrage flared. Respect? The concept struck her as bitterly ironic coming from a man who had just decked a defenseless teenager. She bit back a surge of words, uncertain if a retort would only trigger more violence. Then again, the inertia of the bystanders was gnawing at her sense of justice. She wanted to yell, "He can't keep getting away with this," but her throat felt constricted by fear and adrenaline. Meanwhile, in another corner of town, Dwayne Johnson was sitting on his living room couch, phone in hand, scanning a half-finished script. The ticking of a clock was the only background noise, a mark of how rare and serene such moments had become in his life. Though it was quiet, a subtle disquiet nagged at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When his phone buzzed, he practically leapt to his feet. The unknown number made him pause, but an inner voice told him he needed to answer. Lifting the phone to his ear, Dwayne heard frantic, disjointed breathing. "Mr. Johnson, you need to come quick. There's an officer attacking your daughter at the market," blurted out an anxious voice, every word a violent blow to Dwayne's sense of calm. "Attacking my daughter?" he repeated, dread saturating his tone. The muffled chaos in the background rattled him to the core. Panicked cries, possibly Mia's name being shouted, and the frantic scuffle of movement. In an instant, the fatherly protector inside him roared to life. He demanded details, but the caller managed only a few phrases. "Officer, Nate Larson, hurry! Mia's been hit!" No explanation, no context, just the raw fact that his child was in grave danger. Dwayne abruptly ended the call, phone nearly slipping from his grasp as he bolted upright. He could feel his pulse throbbing in his temples as he snatched his keys, not even bothering to lock the door behind him. His mind reeled with questions. How could something so horrifying happen on an otherwise normal day? Why was a cop assaulting his daughter? Revving the engine of his SUV, he sped out of the driveway, tires squealing. Worry and fury burned in his gut like twin fires. As he tore down the suburban streets, ignoring speed limits, the unthinkable repeated in his head. Someone hurt Mia. A father's worst nightmare had turned real. He pictured her trusting face, her lively spirit. Then he conjured images of an officer's fist colliding with her cheek, and his grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles turned white. Dwayne Johnson's vehicle careened into the market parking lot with a squeal of tires and a cloud of dust. Spotting the knot of people near the produce stalls, he jumped out before the car even came to a full stop. His heart thundered, a torrent of dread fueling his every motion. He scanned the crowd until his eyes locked on Mia, seated on the ground with one hand gingerly cradling her bruised face. Relief that she was conscious merged with anger at seeing her in such pain. Shouldering his way through onlookers, he reached her side in seconds. Kneeling down, he gently cupped her free hand in his. "Mia?" he asked, voice rough with concern. "Sweetheart, are you all right? Please tell me you're okay." The raw anxiety in his eyes told the bystanders that he was far more than a famous actor in this moment. He was a father, terrified for his child's well-being. Tears pooled in Mia's eyes, though she tried to force a reassuring nod. "Dad, I'm okay enough, I guess," she managed. "My face, it hurts." That small admission unleashed a swirl of conflicting emotions in Dwayne. Gratitude that she was alive, rage that she had been harmed. Before Mia could say more, an imposing, uniformed figure cut into Dwayne's field of vision. He rose slowly, pivoting to confront the threat. Officer Nate Larson stood there, wearing an expression that mingled insolence and smug satisfaction. The moment he met Dwayne's glare, his lip curled. "So you're the father," he said in a mocking tone, crossing his arms in a show of forced bravado. "Not that it matters. Your daughter needed a lesson in respect, and maybe you do too." A collective hush draped over the spectators, as though they sensed a significant escalation. Dwayne's fist tightened at his sides, muscles coiled and ready. Though he'd performed countless stunts and fight scenes in his career, the stark reality of someone assaulting his daughter eclipsed all pretense of performance. "You hit my daughter?" Dwayne asked, a chilling quiet lacing his words. "She's a civilian, just shopping. And you attacked her?" Larson raised his chin defiantly. "She was recording me like some big shot, waving a phone around like she's above the law. I taught her otherwise." The arrogance laced in each word pierced Dwayne's self-control. The fatherly protectiveness overshadowed every ounce of caution or measured approach he might have used in a calmer situation. "You had no cause to put your hands on her," he growled. "None." The tension radiated outward, and some onlookers began inching backward to clear space. Phones hovered overhead, capturing every angle. Now it wasn't just Mia's assault on record. A father's fury was about to unfold. Larson let out a derisive laugh as though unfazed by the building hostility. "Oh, you think you can intimidate me, big guy?" he taunted. "You might be known for your movies, but I wear the badge here." With that, he lunged forward, a wild punch aimed at Dwayne's shoulder. Even though it caught him slightly off guard, Dwayne's reflexes kicked in. He twisted, letting the blow glance off his arm and threw a retaliatory shot. The crack of knuckles meeting uniformed torso reverberated, drawing gasps from the spectators. Larson staggered, eyes widening with shock. He'd expected to rattle this father with one good punch, not encounter real resistance. Fueling his next move, he reached for the baton at his hip, brandishing it like a club. At the sight of it, a woman in the crowd screamed, and a man frantically dialed 911. Dwayne squared his stance, adrenaline pumping. He recognized the baton's metallic glint and the damage it could do. If Larson wasn't stopped, Mia could be in further danger, as could anyone else in range. He blocked Larson's first baton swing, hooking an arm beneath the officer's elbow to keep it from striking him full force. The second swing whistled past his ear, nearly clipping him. The crowd roiled, some calling out encouragement, others chanting for the fight to cease. After a brief struggle of grunts and scrapes, Dwayne twisted free. With a calculated pivot, he drove a powerful strike into Larson's torso. The officer yelped, stumbling backward, baton clattering to the ground. Freed from the weapon, he glared at Dwayne with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. But the father refused to let up. The next few moments were a flurry of practice punches and blocks, Dwayne's training merging with raw paternal fury. In seconds, Larson found himself on his knees, wheezing for breath. Mia watched, her cheek throbbing, heart pounding. She had witnessed her father's skill in countless film sequences, but never in an unscripted confrontation so personal. Relief mixed with awe that her father had arrived in time to protect her from further harm. Around them, the bystanders erupted in cheers, some filming with shaky phone cameras. The hush of shock had morphed into vocal support for Dwayne's righteous stand. Larson's labored panting filled the silence as he rested on one knee, battered and clearly disoriented by the swift takedown. Dwayne hovered over him, chest heaving from exertion and anger. For a moment, neither man spoke, but the air crackled with tension. Bystanders pressed in, phones aloft, capturing every fraction of a second. In this era of instant virality, the footage would likely rocket across the internet within minutes, igniting debates about police brutality, racial bias, and the lengths to which a father might go to protect his child. "You ever touch my daughter again? You'll wish I was still acting in a movie," Dwayne warned, voice rippling with menace. The remark jolted Larson, who attempted to stand, swaying unsteadily. A dark smear of blood trickled from the corner of his lip. You're done for," he gasped, trying and failing to keep his voice steady. "I'll ruin you. Assaulting an officer is a felony." His eyes flickered around, possibly seeking an ally among the crowd, but the onlookers only stared back in grim condemnation. Mia, still on the ground, a short distance behind her father, placed a hand on her bruised cheek and breathed shakily. The adrenaline started to subside, allowing pain and shock to settle in fully. A wave of gratitude coursed through her. Dwayne was here. She was no longer alone, but her relief remained tinged with fury that such an encounter had transpired at all. Suddenly, the distant wail of sirens cut through the clamor. Two squad cars screeched to a halt near the market's entry, gravel spitting out under tires. Doors flung open, uniformed officers rushing to the scene. The crowd parted to let them through, voices clamoring, "Over here!" and "He attacked her!" Their combined stories swirled into an outraged chorus directed at Larson. Among the responding officers was Sergeant Elaine Porter, her gaze sweeping across the battered scene, Larson pinned in place by Dwayne's dominating stance, and a cluster of bystanders brandishing phones to ensure the truth was documented. Porter's stern expression spoke volumes. She recognized that chaos had erupted, and it involved one of her own. "Everyone back," she ordered firmly, holding an arm out to maintain distance. Approaching the kneeling Larson, she noted his disheveled state. Then her gaze flickered to the baton lying abandoned on the ground. "Larson, what the hell happened here?" she demanded, though from the collective condemnation in the crowd, she might already have guessed. "He assaulted me!" Larson spat, voice slurring slightly from a bruised jaw. "He and that girl, both!" He jabbed a shaky finger at Mia, who was trying to stand, one hand braced against a produce crate for balance. A furious clamor erupted from the onlookers. "No way! He attacked her first! We have it all on video!" The voices overlapped, each more incensed than the last. One man waved his phone aggressively in Porter's direction. "You want the footage? I've got the entire thing, from when he smashed her phone to when he punched her in the face." Porter's eyes hardened at the mention of video evidence. As if responding to an unspoken cue, several others hoisted their phones to indicate they, too, had captured the incident. Larson's scowl deepened, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. Then Sergeant Porter shifted her gaze to Dwayne, who still stood at the ready, fists half clenched. "Sir, I need you to step back," she said calmly, though her posture conveyed that she expected his cooperation. "We'll handle this from here." Dwayne exhaled a ragged breath, glancing at Mia. She offered a tentative nod, as if to assure him that stepping aside was the right move. Slowly, Dwayne backed away, the tendons in his neck still taut with residual fury. He returned to Mia's side, gently helping her to her feet. Now in command, Sergeant Porter summoned the older officer who had arrived with her. They stooped to gather statements from the throng. Some pointed vehemently at Larson, recounting how he singled out Mia with no provocation, destroyed her phone, and punched her. Several described how Dwayne had arrived only afterward, reacting in defense of his daughter. Larson, glaring at the nearest phone pointed in his direction, tried once more to retake control. "I gave her lawful orders," he hissed. "She disobeyed me and resisted." But the evidence swirling around him was damning. There were simply too many witnesses, too many cameras capturing every second of his brutality. Mia leaned against her father, pressing a hand to her cheek, which pulsed with throbbing pain. Yet she found a measure of solace in seeing how the public tide had turned so sharply against Larson. No longer was she alone, a single voice protesting an unjust cop. Now an entire crowd and multiple smartphones validated her truth. It was the first glimmer of hope she'd felt since being struck. Amid the tapestry of shocked voices, Officer Larson tried to maintain his crumbling facade of authority. Sergeant Porter, after hearing the repeated accusations and watching multiple video clips, guided him aside. The older officer on the scene, Lieutenant Dave Russell, stepped in to handle the influx of testimonies. The battered officer stood with fists balled, shoulders trembling from a cocktail of rage and humiliation. A smear of blood marred his chin, and his hair stuck to his forehead in sweaty clumps. Larson, Porter said in a low voice, these witnesses aren't describing a lawful stop. They're describing an unprovoked assault. She looked far from pleased. Law enforcement didn't relish investigating one of their own for violence, yet ignoring the evidence in plain view would be irresponsible. Unprovoked? He repeated, his breath catching. She refused to follow my orders. She was disrespectful. I had every right. Porter cut him off with a dark glare. We have multiple videos that show you smashing her phone and punching her without any clear provocation. That's not standard procedure in any department I'm aware of. Hand over your badge and weapon. Larson's protest died in his throat, replaced by a muted fury that twitched at the corners of his mouth. Begrudgingly, he unfastened the badge from his uniform and surrendered his firearm. His eyes flicked hatefully across the crowd, as though memorizing the faces of those who had defied his sense of power. This is a goddamn joke, he muttered under his breath. Officer Larson, you're under arrest for assault and misconduct, Porter announced, raising her voice so the nearby onlookers heard the charges. A hush descended, followed by a ripple of relief-fueled applause and murmured support for Mia and Dwayne. Meanwhile, Mia stood with Dwayne's protective arm around her shoulders. Though her cheeks still throbbed with pain, her head ached less from shock and more with a sense of weary clarity. The injustice was being addressed. Larson wouldn't walk away consequence-free. She wondered if the real fight might just be beginning, but at least for now, she was safe. At last, the paramedics arrived in an ambulance, weaving through the onlookers with a stretcher and medkit. One of them, a middle-aged woman with a calm smile, approached Mia gently. Let's check that bruise, sweetheart, she offered, guiding Mia to sit on a nearby bench. They examined her cheek, pressed an ice pack carefully against it, and concluded she might need a follow-up check, but was stable enough to forego a trip to the hospital if she preferred. Dwayne hovered throughout the examination, hands flexing restlessly at his sides. You sure she's all right? He asked, brow furrowed, each word brimming with paternal concern. The paramedic gave him an understanding nod. She'll be okay. It looks like a bad bruise and maybe some swelling, but we haven't found fractures or anything. Keep that ice on. Watch for headaches or dizziness. If she feels any of that, get her to a doctor right away. Larson, meanwhile, was being led away, handcuffed and glowering. Some people sneered at him, others hurled sharp remarks, while a few simply stood in stony silence, satisfied that the guilty party was facing justice. The crowd parted, capturing each moment with phone cameras. The hum of outraged conversation never fully dissipated, as though the entire market was still processing the abrupt meltdown of trust. Mia turned her gaze to Dwayne, who looked back at her with a mixture of relief, love, and undercurrent anger. She recognized in his eyes the haunting question, what if I hadn't come in time? She gave him a small nod, wanting to reassure him that at least now, they were both out of immediate danger. Officer Porter approached them, notepad in hand, face grave. We'll need formal statements from both of you, she explained. Your accounts of the incident are crucial. We also have multiple eyewitness videos, which will help the investigation. Dwayne nodded. We'll cooperate fully, he replied, voice still taut with residual fury. I want to make sure this man is never allowed near my daughter or anyone else. Not with a badge, at least. The sergeant offered a measured nod. I understand. She looked to Mia. We'll interview you at the station or wherever you feel comfortable. For now, go home, rest. We'll be in contact soon. Just Take care of yourself. Mia's cheek flared with another pulse of pain, but she forced a thin, grateful smile. Thank you, she managed quietly, hugging the ice pack closer. With that, the paramedics and responding officers gradually dispersed, leaving the market to slowly return to a semblance of order. Vendors tentatively resumed their calls, and shoppers navigated produce stands once more, though now the entire atmosphere was charged with the memory of what had transpired. Leaving the swarm of onlookers, Dwayne helped Mia to her feet, carefully guiding her across the asphalt. The cool mid-morning breeze felt oddly disconnected from the violence that had just rattled their world. Stray pieces of shattered plastic from Mia's phone still lay scattered, a tangible testament to what had sparked the confrontation. She felt a pang of loss, her personal data, photos, and notes abruptly destroyed in a single moment of aggression. Yet that seemed almost trivial compared to the strike she'd endured. As they approached Dwayne's SUV, he opened the passenger door for her. Mia slid onto the seat gingerly, still holding the ice pack to her cheek. She winced at every jostle. I'll drive slow, Dwayne murmured, eyes flicking over her bruises. We'll get you home and check if you need anything else. Painkillers, water, rest. Mia nodded, the day's events swirling in her mind like a storm. She thought she'd just been making a quick run for groceries, maybe picking out sweet treats for a simple father-daughter night. Instead, she'd become the target of an embittered officer's brutality. How many times does this happen to people without any witnesses, she wondered, her heart aching at the thought. As they pulled out of the parking lot, she glimpsed the last few onlookers still huddling near the spot where Larson had been apprehended. Some parted with sympathetic waves, while others busied themselves texting or posting the footage. The entire ordeal would be dissected online soon, Mia realized with a sinking feeling. She braced for the possibility that her face, battered and tear-streaked, would become a viral image representing police misconduct. Dwayne's knuckles were taut against the steering wheel, as though he was restraining an avalanche of simmering rage. Mia, he said softly, almost an apology, I'm sorry this happened. I wish I could have been there the moment he laid eyes on you. Stopped him before... His voice cracked, an unspoken horror trailing off into silence. She placed a hand on his forearm. Dad, it's not your fault, she assured him, though tears shimmered at the corners of her eyes. You came as soon as you found out. That's all that matters. And truly, the recollection of seeing her father stride through the crowd, terror and fury in his gaze, brought her comfort. The drive home felt surreal. They passed neat lawns, children playing on the sidewalks, and a cluster of retirees strolling with their morning coffees. How could the world seem so normal when she was grappling with the aftershock of violent injustice? She imagined how the day would have gone if Larson had never approached her. She'd be returning triumphantly with fruit, chips, maybe a special ice cream flavor for fun, stepping into the house with a silly grin. Instead, as they pulled into the driveway, Mia's cheek throbbed painfully, and an undercurrent of dread gnawed at her. She exhaled a long breath, feeling too drained to wonder how the public might react or how a potential court case would unfold. All she craved was the solace of home, her father's comforting presence, and a moment of peace to quiet the tumult in her head. Slipping inside, the hush of the house enveloped them, a stark contrast to the chaos at the market. Mia sank onto the living room couch, relief mingling with exhaustion. Dwayne hovered near the kitchen, rummaging for a second ice pack, as well as some bottled water. He re-emerged, placing them on the coffee table. For a beat, neither spoke. Eventually, he reached for the TV remote, flipping through channels without really registering any of them. Thought we'd be watching a movie tonight, he said, voice low. But I guess real life had other plans. The forced note of humor failed to mask the storm brewing behind his eyes. Mia glanced at him, murmuring, maybe we can still watch something, once I calm down. The desire for normalcy tugged at her, though a wave of queasiness about the day's events was hard to ignore. The house that usually resonated with calm now felt laden with an unspoken tension. Mia peered at her reflection in a large mirror hanging by the hallway, cringing at the swelling that had become more pronounced on her cheek. It pulsed with every heartbeat, a relentless reminder of Officer Larson's cruelty. Even so, she detected a flicker of her own resilience in her gaze. She was still standing, still refusing to let this incident define her entire identity. Sensing her father's turmoil, she joined Dwayne in the living room. He had set down a couple of cold drinks on the coffee table, but his eyes remained fixed on the silent television, which displayed a pause-streaming menu. She mustered a small smile. "How about some comedic action flick to keep our minds off reality?" she ventured, hoping to lighten the atmosphere. He looked at her, the corners of his mouth twitching as if he wanted to return her smile, but couldn't quite manage it. "We can try," he said softly, "though I'm not sure how long I'll last before rehashing everything in my head." Mia eased herself into the couch, gingerly laying the fresh ice pack on her throbbing cheek. "Dad, you don't have to keep apologizing," she told him gently, reading his lingering guilt in every muscle of his posture. "You saved me. I'm just angry he even had the chance to do this in the first place." Dwayne's gaze flicked to her cheek. "It's not right," he muttered, voice laced with an undercurrent of fury. "He was a cop, someone people are supposed to trust, and he singled you out for no reason, destroyed your phone, and attacked you. If I hadn't gotten there—" His voice wavered again, trailing off. "Don't think like that," Mia pleaded, feeling her own chest tighten. The what-ifs threatened to drown them both. "We have to focus on what happens next. The other officers said they'd need our statements. We have all those witnesses. Plus, I'm pretty sure half the market filmed it." Dwayne inclined his head, letting out a slow, measured breath. "You're right. We'll make sure the truth is laid out so there's no doubt in anyone's mind." Another hush fell, and they found themselves glancing at the paused TV screen. Mia recognized the irony. Only a short while ago, she was at the market to gather groceries for a carefree family night in. The bruised reality overshadowed that small dream now, turning it into a bittersweet reminder of how quickly life's trajectory can shift. Yet the day wasn't entirely overshadowed by darkness. Already messages began pouring in from neighbors and local acquaintances. Dwayne's phone buzzed with concerned texts, many referencing clips uploaded to social media. Hastily, he scrolled through a few, grimacing at the heart-wrenching image of Mia on the ground. One extended video clip garnered thousands of views within minutes, and the comments section burned with debates about police accountability and praise for a father's protective intervention. Mia watched over Dwayne's shoulder, a knot forming in her stomach. She wondered how it would feel to see the moment Larson's fist collided with her face, now repeated and dissected by strangers worldwide. The idea unsettled her. Nobody wants their trauma broadcast to the masses. Yet she also recognized how crucial these videos were to ensuring that people believed her story. Too many had faced wrongful accusations, or had their narratives twisted. At least in her case, video evidence told the unvarnished truth. A wave of exhaustion swept through her. She sank back against the cushions. "I feel so tired," she admitted, pressing a hand to her temple. "I'm not sure if it's from the adrenaline crash or the blow to my head." Dwayne's eyes flashed with concern. "Should I take you to the hospital?" he asked urgently. "They can do a scan. Make sure there's no concussion." Mia hesitated. "The paramedics said I'm mostly okay, just bruised. Maybe we can watch for any bad symptoms, and if I get worse, we'll go right away." She tried to project confidence, but part of her quivered at the prospect of a hospital visit, more questions, more public scenes. "Sure," Dwayne conceded, though he wore an expression that said he'd keep a vigilant eye on her all night. Slowly, he pressed play on the streaming service. A familiar comedic movie flickered to life, its opening credits rolling. Mia's battered face ached with every breath, but she welcomed the distraction, no matter how temporary. Night settled over the Johnson household, draping the living room in a cozy glow from a single lamp near the couch. The comedic movie played on the TV in the background, though neither father nor daughter truly absorbed the storyline. Mia cuddled up with a soft blanket, and Dwayne sat close by, arms folded protectively across his broad chest. The warmth of the home contrasted with the uneasy weight pressing down on both of them. Every so often, Mia's phone crisis would spring to mind, and she would reflexively reach for the device that was no longer there. A pang of sadness followed each time. her digital record of everyday life wiped out by a single violent act. Yet when she recalled the raw fear in that moment, the phone's destruction paled beside the blow she had taken to the face. She was still grappling with the reality of a uniformed figure crossing every line of decency. While the film's comedic antics flickered across the screen, Dwayne occasionally checked his own phone, face lit by its bluish glow. Worried texts and social media tags poured in, some from local reporters seeking a comment, others from well-meaning friends in the entertainment industry who had caught wind of the viral market altercation. The swirl of attention forming around the incident made Dwayne's stomach twist. He'd spent years learning how to handle paparazzi and press conferences, but this was different. This was personal, an assault on his daughter that had nothing to do with promoting a film. Mia's eyes drifted to the half-finished bag of ice on the coffee table. Its contents had partially melted, water droplets pooling under the plastic. The movie's comedic chase scene concluded, but she barely noticed. "Dad," she said quietly, "you think it'll actually matter in court that I was filming him first? I've heard stories, people twisting facts to protect the cop." Dwayne turned the TV volume down a notch and looked at her, voice soft but firm. "We have a ton of witnesses, and at least half a dozen recordings besides the one he destroyed. Even the paramedics saw the aftermath. Plus, the other officers arrested him on the spot. Trust me, it's not just your word against his." She absorbed his reassurance, though a flicker of uncertainty remained. "Still, it terrifies me that if this could happen to me, the daughter of someone with a public platform, how many others go through this without any recourse?" Her voice trembled, revealing the heartache behind her frustration. His brow furrowed, eyes clouding with the same thought. "I know," he admitted. "That's why we can't stay quiet. If we do, who's to say he won't be out there, in some other department, harming someone else's daughter next time?" She mustered a faint nod. The house settled in a contemplative hush, broken only by the film's soundtrack and their steady breathing. Eventually, she let out a sigh. "I'm exhausted, Dad. My cheek feels like it's on fire, and my head is pounding." Alarm flashed across Dwayne's features. He stood up, gently helping her off the couch. "Come on, you need to sleep. I'll get you some painkillers, and we'll keep an eye on your symptoms." He paused, voice wavering. "I just wish none of this had happened." They switched off the TV, the comedic film's credits rolling on a dark screen. In the hallway, the overhead light cast gentle shadows, and Mia caught sight of her reflection in the mirror once again. This time, she saw not just the bruise, but also a weary, determined young woman. Her father placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, guiding her down the corridor to her room. Inside, the familiar posters and soft bedding beckoned, though the day's events gnawed at her peace. She sank onto the mattress, wincing at the pressure on her cheek. Dwayne lingered in the doorway, not quite ready to leave. "I'll be right here if you need me," he said. "Just call." Mia swallowed the knot in her throat. "Thanks," she whispered, hoping the small word carried all the gratitude she felt. The moment he gently closed the door, she allowed a few tears to slip free. The day had twisted from a simple errand into a life-altering confrontation that would likely define her summer, and maybe more. She stared at the ceiling for what felt like ages, her mind replaying the blow, the fear, her father's intervention, in the crowd's mixture of outrage and fascination, and yet beneath the swirling thoughts, a quiet current of hope emerged. Tomorrow they would give official statements, and the truth would be laid bare. A uniform didn't grant a license to abuse. The recordings would ensure no lie could overshadow the reality. In a world that often felt chaotic and unjust, perhaps this time there would be real consequences. Watch till the end. In a realm where power can be twisted and everyday peace can unravel in an instant, this story highlights the unyielding force of a father's protection and a daughter's unwavering resolve. When confronted by an officer who broke his pledge to serve and protect, a routine grocery run became a fight for dignity and truth. If you found strength or solace in their battle for justice, please hit like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Because in sharing stories like this, we remind one another that resilience flourishes when we refuse to stay silent. Let's stand together against all forms of abuse, ensuring that no one faces such trials alone.